Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Audrey Lichter, the Executive Director of Chai Mitzvah, the Resource Center for Jewish Engagement. Today's scholars' topic is how politicized K through 12 education is radicalizing American youth, featuring Dr. Brandy Shufutinsky. Chai Mitzvah is a national organization now celebrating its 16th year. We are the sponsor of Scholar Circle and a Jewish resource center that focuses on building community through Jewish engagement programs. We have over 20 curricula tailored for small group conversation for teens and adults that can be lay or professionally led. For more information, please visit our website at chaimitzvah.org. The Scholar Circle program was inspired by Scott Shea. Scott is our founder and board president, who authored a best-selling book, Conspiracy U, a Case Study, which unpacks anti-Zionist conspiracy theories from the left and the right of the political spectrum. You can purchase Scott's book along with the accompanying curriculum, which has been taught to hundreds of college students and others, for only $18 on our Chai Mitzvah website. The curriculum was also taught in a recorded series by Dr. Andrew Pessin. You will receive all this information in our follow-up email as well. The Scholar Circle hosts lectures by prominent scholars every 2 weeks on topics relating to Israel and the Jewish community, geared towards rabbis, educators, and lay leaders who are charged with explaining the complex issues the Jewish community is facing. To that end, each lecture will have a resource guide that will be sent to you after the lecture. A recording of each lecture will be accessible on our website and shared with you through email. We are excited to continue the Scholar Circle program, and we need your support to keep it thriving. Scholar Circle has engaged nearly 3,000 participants since 10/7. Your donation will enable us to continue bringing international scholars to you at no charge to share their expertise on the evolving Jewish world in the aftermath of October 7th. Please help us reach our goal of $40,000. To make a donation, please visit chaimitzvah.org and click on the gold menu tab, Scholar Circle, and select Support Scholar Circle. This will be included in our follow-up email as well. And thank you for considering supporting this engaging program for all. Our featured scholar tonight is Dr. Brandy Shufutinsky, a social worker, writer, researcher working to counter the illiberal takeover of our education system. Dr. Shufutinsky has been published in Newsweek, Jewish Journal, the Jerusalem Post, Sapir, White Rose Magazine, and JNS. She has worked towards advancing the rights of victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault within the military community through practice, education, and research. Dr. Shufutinsky was a 2021 scholar in residence at the Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism and Policy, Oxford Summer Institute, where she worked to develop curriculum in critical antisemitism studies. She is the Director of Education and Community Engagement with the North American Values Institute. Before I welcome our scholar, a couple of housekeeping items. To submit questions, please use the Q&A button on your screen. Q&A will be held in about 40 minutes into the lecture, but you can submit questions anytime throughout. The lecture recording will be sent to your email in a few days and will be available on our website at chaimitzvah.org. Now to Dr. Brandy Shufutinsky.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Audrey. I really do appreciate being here. I'm excited to jump right in, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I want to start when we're talking about how politicized K through 12 education is radicalizing American youth. I want to start with the question of what's the point? What's the purpose? What are the benefits of our K through 12 education system in the United States? And I think it's important for us to really think about that before we tackle what's happening in K through 12 education right now. What's the point? And then we can go on and ask, are our goals aligned with that purpose? So this quote was made by George Washington, and I think it's important enough to read through it quickly. So amongst the motives to such an institution, the assimilation of the principles, opinions, and manners of our countrymen by the common education of a portion of our youth from every quarter well deserves attention. The more homogeneous our citizens can be made in these particulars, the greater will be our prospect of a permanent union, and a primary object of such a national institution should be the education of our youth in the science of government. In a republic, what species of knowledge can be equally important and what duty more pressing on its legislature than to patronize a plan for communicating it to those who are to be the future guardians of the liberties of the country? So, in reading this quote and thinking about the purpose of education, I always think about the United States K through 12 public school system as very unique. It's one of the only education systems in the world that's free for kids, 12 to 13 years, depending on kindergarten, where kids are supposed to be given the tools necessary to become productive members of our democratic republic. Education serves the purpose of being the great equalizer. It can either build or it can tear down our society. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a huge rise of studies departments in academia. These studies departments led to a decrease in scholarship, and they were very grievance focused. So this book that was published a few years ago by Kasim Kassam has this quote where he talks about what makes somebody gravitate towards extremism. In this quote, the perception of grievance in the form of injustice, oppression, or socioeconomic exclusion is an important factor which makes people receptive to extremist ideas. And one reason this idea is important when we're talking about K through 12 education is we're seeing a sort of increase and celebration of a grievance type culture in education. When we think about academia, where we've seen, unfortunately, over the past, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, this decline in majors like history, and we've seen a rise in studies majors, whether that's gender studies or ethnic studies or Black studies. And it's important to make the distinction between history and studies because the studies pedagogy relies on a binary or a framework that is very rigid, that is very ideologically based, and isn't rooted in much academic scholarship. We're seeing that unfortunately trickle down to the K through 12 space. The clip that I'm about to show you is an example of one of the programs and organizations that is being taught in K through 12 schools right now. This organization is called Woke Kindergarten. They more famously became known for having received $250,000 contract to provide some teacher training and curriculum development in Hayward Unified School District in Northern California. When the public became aware of it, there was a bit of outrage. The contract was canceled, but I think it was canceled 1 or 2 years into a 3-year contract. So I'm going to play this clip from the director of that program.
Yes, everyone, the rumors are true. I am anti-Israel. I am pro-Palestine. And I am 100% 10 toes down anti-Israel. I believe Israel has no right to exist. I believe the United States has no right to exist. I believe every settler colony who has committed genocide against native peoples, against indigenous people, has no right to exist. I believe in a free Palestine from the river to the sea. I believe one day Palestine will be free. Is this news to anybody? Did I just throw some bars at you and not even do it all? Because when your work is poetry, that's what happens. Keep coming for me. Keep coming for me. These people keep coming for me. I am pro-humanity.
So I don't know how many of you remember, I was an 80s kid, but there was a commercial in the 1980s where it was, do you know where your kids are? A reminder to parents to, make sure their kids are home, made at home safe. And I feel like now it's more appropriate to ask, do you know who's with your kids in the classroom? Especially when we have activists like this who have access to our kids. And we're also seeing organizations like Woke Kindergarten. This is just one organization of many, many that are operating in our K through 12 education system. They provide open source resources. So you go to their website and there are lesson plans already there, easily accessible to educators and teachers to simply push a button, download them, and take them into the classroom and teach kids from them. So this is how indoctrination works. You get a cartoonish character that appeals to kids. You print it with messages that are fit for older audiences about a controversial topic. These are just some more gems from Woke Kindergarten. This character is called Little Comrade, Little Power. There are woke words of the day on this website for teachers to bring into the classroom. There's an entire toolkit, the bigger picture you see that says anti-capitalist approaches to fostering classroom responsibility. It's an entire toolkit for teachers to use to make their classrooms anti-capitalist. So if anyone here has worked in especially the younger elementary school grades or been in the classroom, kids have, jobs. There's the line leader, there's maybe the snack helper, all of those little jobs. Well, this anti-capitalist approach says that those things in the classroom are actually bad. It's bad for kids to do classroom jobs because it perpetuates capitalist ideas. And then you can see where Woke Kindergarten dives into the anti-Israel version of anti-Semitism. There are entire toolkits to help kids learn how to be activists, how to stand against what they call Zionist occupiers. Again, this is how indoctrination works. These cartoons, they're geared towards younger kids, younger elementary school kids, preschool kids. This isn't made for older kids. This isn't a project for academia to be debated at the university level. And we've seen this type of propaganda before. So from the Cold War to Joe Camel. And there's a reason why Joe Camel got challenged, because there was this idea that because it was a cartoon character, the cigarette company was targeting children. That's not really different from the previous slide that you see here. So curricula, lesson plans, resources, teach-ins, they've all been developed with the youngest students in mind. This is, again, just one example where the programming that took place in Brooklyn, New York was targeted for Black youth ages 4 to 11. And this program was kids as comrades, wandering towards an abolitionist future and advocating for free housing for all. I don't know about everybody on here, but I will say I find it interesting that an organization that puts itself out there to deal with curriculum for K through 12 education is focused on communist ideology, critiquing capitalism, calling kids comrades, and having kids do work for free housing for all. So there's a recipe to it. You advocate for a mandate or a requirement. You convince young kids that this requirement's in their best interest. You make them think that those who are against the requirement are against them. You convince kids to be part of the movement, that that's the way for them to be powerful, the way for them to be liberated, for them to be a warrior. And of course, you pay them or provide them some sort of incentive. So the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies is a group of a few dozen different organizations. And they put together a couple of years ago a youth organizer cohort. What they were looking for in recruiting were high school students that would participate in an 8-week program that would indoctrinate them with a specific ideology so that those kids could then start demonstrating and demanding liberated ethnic studies, which they did. At the completion of the 8-week program, each participant, each child was awarded $500. And so the recipe continues. This is just one slide from the materials that the kids that participated in the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies Youth Organizer Program received. So one of the steps, another part of the recipe, is you develop action steps. In this instance, it was walkouts. You demand that kids walk out in solidarity with Palestine and Gaza. You have them create some sort of art projects. We saw a lot of murals created, the very anti-Israel murals, celebrating Hamas, denying the October 7th attack, or justifying it. You see the signs like the young lady that's holding on the bottom square, Rasa for Palestine. So you make sure that the movement is intersectional enough to include as many kids as possible. Kids from all different types of cultures, all different backgrounds, kids who couldn't point to Israel or let alone Gaza on a map. And so these radical activist groups are organizing across the United States and other countries, a lot of other countries in the West. And besides the types of demonstrations that you see here in the promotional flyers, these groups are responsible for lobbying for specific educational materials to be used in the K-12 school system. They also create toolkits for walkouts. and then go assist or lead children out of their high school to walk out in solidarity. And one of the important steps that they take in order to do this is they create a group around a movement. And again, it's very similar to a lot of what we saw criminal justice experts explore when they were trying to figure out how do they tackle youth involvement in gangs. So there's been this resurgence in certain words: abolition, liberation, comrade, youth movement, etc. The lessons in liberation educators or the abolitionist education network, these are all very familiar names and faces. Actually, you can see that the director from Woke Kindergarten was featured in um, this webinar about abolition in our pre-K through 12 classroom. And I think that one of the questions I really want to ask is, how's all of this abolition in our classrooms? How's it working? How's it working out for kids? How's Rasa for Palestine or Lil Comrade working out for students as far as their reading and mathematics achievement level? Well, we can see that 28% of eighth grade students in the United States of America are proficient in math. 28%. 31% of fourth graders are proficient in reading. So for all of the programming about abolition and liberation and comrade and youth movement, our kids' achievement levels in the basics, math and reading, are abysmal. Again, showing demonstrating a little bit of a distraction from focus on scholarship and academics to focus on activism. And I want to show a clip here. I want to end with this short clip. And although this isn't our schools yet, encouraging physical violence, the stage is being set to normalize this type of behavior.
Sports and fellowship. In the Gaza Strip, however, Hamas and Islamic Jihad used them to instill a dangerous message. Leaders labeled these gatherings the Summer of Liberation.
We did not come here to enjoy ourselves or to play or anything like that. We came with our souls, our blood, our martyrs, and our willingness to sacrifice ourselves for Palestine and for our people.
This promotional video urged students of all grade levels, from primary through college, to participate. Activities included target practice involving AK-47s, anti-tank weapons, and video simulations.
So that in the next phase, all willing, these boys will be able to confront the plundering enemy and disfigure its face in the next war.
In May of 2021, Hamas and other Islamic groups used the name the Sword of Jerusalem when describing that year's 11-day war with Israel. Their goal? Prepare the coming generation for the next war.
We say to the enemy, these children picked up these weapons and we trained them how to use them as well as how to take security measures so that they will follow in the footsteps of their fathers and take up arms, Allah willing.
These young men and boys learned anti-Semitism at an early age.
We asked Hitler why he left some of you alive. He did so in order to show us how wicked you are. We will come to you from under the ground and hammer fear into your hearts. And above the ground, we will tear your bodies apart with our rockets. Scram into the shelters, you mice, you sons of Jewish women.
When viewing the footage of the summer camp side by side with the attacks from October 7th, it's sobering evidence how that training became reality, with the devastating results: 1,200 Israelis murdered, 240 kidnapped. In an interview with NBC News, Israeli President Isaac Herzog revealed this terror training to the world.
Let me show you a document, highly confidential, strictly confidential document, which we just unraveled from the Hamas headquarters. It's a brochure, which is a directive by the commanders of Hamas as to how to manage summer camps for children in order to disseminate the values of jihad. It says it clearly, to disseminate the values of jihad and the values of the resistance, meaning terror, how to make it a militarized society.
Herzog compared these camps of hatred to what's instilled in other parts of the world.
Whilst we all know what summer camps are and what they're aimed for, and what a wonderful experience it is to enable youngsters, kids, and adults, adolescents, to become citizens of the free world with liberties, with happiness, with joy, with sports. Here, the entire aim is to make them terrorists.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing there. And just talk a little bit about the last clip and how it relates to what we're seeing in our K through 12 system now. Especially since the war against Hamas has started, and a lot of the programming and curricula that has been presented in the UNRWA schools in Gaza has been uncovered and made a bit more public. We're seeing very similar type ideology and rhetoric in our schools here in the United States. There are a couple of examples of posts made by these community organizations led by activists that are working and operating in our schools right now, that they made posts justifying the massacre. They made posts denying the massacre. They blamed the victims of the massacre and celebrated Hamas. So again, I want to make sure that I'm not minimizing what is happening in Israel to what's happening here, but I do want to point out that the seeds that were planted in the kids that you just saw are very, very similar to the seeds that are being planted in the minds of our kids here, as far as it being acceptable to and normalized to have the type of bigotry and express the type of violence against a group of people because of their ethno-religious identity.
So there are a couple of questions to further understand who's writing the curriculum, and where's the money coming from for this, and what is the ultimate goal for the people that are, and how do they get into the school systems?
Okay, so I can start with who's writing the curriculum. And the couple of examples that I showed from Woke Kindergarten, from the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies, the people that work for those organizations write the lessons or they curate them. There are dozens of other organizations that are doing something very similar. I didn't include it in the slides, but I can talk about some of it a little bit. One of them is an organization called Teaching While Muslim. Now, Teaching While Muslim is based out of New Jersey, and they have a bunch of some curricula that they co-wrote with CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations, and some curricula lessons that they've done themselves. But they've made lessons on September 11th, and for early elementary, for middle, and for high school kids. In those lessons, they put out materials, again, blaming the September 11th attack on the United States of America. So we're having people that have ties to academia. Some of them are professors, and then they also work and partner with these radical community organizations, and they develop curricula and use all the resources afforded them in their university department to do so. And also the credentials, because when you have a credential as being a university professor, it's pretty easy to say, well, yeah, I'm an expert in this. I should be the one that you defer to. Some of them are written, unfortunately, by classroom teachers who may have an agenda themselves, or who've curated information from sources that they thought were credible, but those sources weren't. And that's how materials get into the classroom. Who's paying for it? Well, it depends where it comes from. A lot of these organizations are nonprofits. They're 501c3s, so they're funded through donors. Some of them are attached to universities, so they get funding through that relationship. A lot of them are funded by us, the taxpayer, because if a community organization signs a contract with the school district and the superintendent signs that contract and approves of it, well, the school district's then paying that organization with taxpayer funds. It's a public school.
So what is the relationship between the teacher in the classroom and the curriculum? If it's just how does that work? If a school pays for a curriculum, does a teacher, do they get trained in it? Do they have to teach it? What happens if they don't want to teach it? And what is the feedback loop in terms of what is being taught in the classroom?
It's different district by district. So certain states and certain districts, individual teachers have a lot more flexibility to create their own lessons and teach from that in the classroom. They're still supposed to adhere to the academic standards of the subject. So if they're supposed to be teaching fourth graders division, it's not like they can go and teach them astronomy. Like there's certain things they're supposed to do, but how they teach it is up to the discretion of the teacher in many, many, many districts. What happens as far as contracting. A school district will contract with an organization to come in and provide, say, professional development. So in the case of I'll use ethnic studies as an example, since that's something that I've worked on a lot and it's a pretty hot topic. Santa Ana Unified School District, that was actually just sued, and the good side won that lawsuit, contracted with an organization to come in and provide teacher professional development and curriculum development for ethnic studies. That organization is very explicit and open and proud about their anti-Israel position. They don't really try to tiptoe around their belief that it's okay to engage in anti-Jewish bigotry. So they're training teachers on a specific subject. They're training them on the pedagogy to use, the framework to use, which materials are appropriate in their from their point of view to bring in and use in the classroom. Now, if you have a district administrator, the person who's the director of curriculum, the superintendent, maybe the head of the Department of Social Studies in a particular school, who says, no, this is what I want all of the kids to learn, so this is what the teachers must teach by, then the teachers have to teach according to that. However, if those things violate, say, education code, civil rights laws, state standards, then there's recourse for a teacher, a parent, a student to go through. That's one of the things that we do in our organization is we work directly with people that are impacted by this type of negative curricula, lessons, and learning environment.
An anonymous attendee asks, what is Qatar's role in radicalizing? Are they just providing funds for terrorists, or are they directly involved? What about George Soros's involvement?
So there's a lot of there are a lot of eyes on Qatari funds and how that has impacted the educational environment in the United States. We know that the Qatar Fund has funded a lot of programming in universities across the country that have taken positions that are very anti-American, that are anti-Semitic. Those are being uncovered by organizations. They have been actually for quite a few years. ISGAP, where I was a summer fellow, reported on this, I think almost, has it been 10 years, a while ago. NCRI released a report going into Qatari funding. So people are looking into that to see what they're doing. I think if you look in higher education, one of the things we've seen is whether it's Qatar, some other nefarious actor will fund, say, a dean or a department, and then that dean or department is being run according to whatever framework or ideology the funders want them to run it by. So I think that we've uncovered some of that. I'm sure there's a whole lot more to uncover, and thankfully there are really smart people looking into that. Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm sorry. And somebody mentioned George Soros. So we see something similar with was it Open Society, which again, people are looking into, and all of the different initiatives that they've funded that have been directly involved in education.
Just to clarify, so we don't have a standardized curriculum in the United States, like a history curriculum so the way it works is every school board or every state puts out their curriculum. And going back to George Washington's quote, did he have in mind that we should have some kind of standardized curriculum, do you think, or that everyone in the United States, as a citizen of the United States, learned? Or
I can't, I mean, I would think possibly, but I also have to acknowledge that at the time, it's not like he could envision what the makeup of the United States looks like now. I will say, no, we do not have a national curriculum in the United States. One of the countries that I've researched a little bit on it that used to have one, I don't believe they do anymore. And it's interesting because their academic outcomes have fallen off of cliffs since they got rid of it, but it was France. And no, so each state has a state level Department of Education, a state level Board of Education. That's where standards for the state are created. So if the standard is that you take in high school 4 years of history or social studies, you have to take 2 years of math, you have to take 3 years of science. That's done at the state level. The standards are broad enough that individual districts and teachers can then kind of have a lot of wiggle room in how they teach to those standards. In a state like California, where at the state level, they now mandated ethnic studies as a high school graduation requirement, that's where we're seeing and have seen over the past few years a lot of the politicized ideology, divisiveness, anti Semitism, and anti Americanism, where we've seen a lot of it come in through that mandate. So when you have activists that are able to lobby a state level government to the point of making a mandate, well, then they get a lot of control over how that mandate is then carried out.
Mm. Yeah, people are asking whatever happened to reading, writing, and arithmetic. um, so have school boards been successful in tackling these issues?
Some of them have, and I mean, this is a position that I think that many of us, or a part of our government that many people haven't paid attention to. We don't really pay attention to who is running for school board. If we have an elected school board, some cities have it where the mayor appoints the school board, like in the city of Philadelphia.
Ah,
Um, so there are school boards where there has been success in making sure that they're making sure that, student learning is what should come first. This isn't a Schools aren't a lab for kids to be guinea pigs on adult ideology and political agendas. They're supposed to be spaces where kids are provided the tools necessary so when they graduate high school, they could become productive members of society. They could enjoy the benefits and responsibilities of citizenship. They can join the workforce. They can continue their education in higher education. That idea, I think we've been overall kind of distracted away from as we've seen the imposition of ideology and ideological agendas seep into the K-12 space, and that's taken the place of scholarship.
um, I'm thinking of something that my grandson said to me. He's in he's in 8th grade, and he was asked to do a book report on uh, medical experiments at the Holocaust, uh, Mengele's medical experiments. That was his book report that he had to do. And it feels to me that we're confused. Like, what are we wanting our kids to learn? Like, what are we teaching? That felt to me also kind of odd that you'd ask an 8th grader to look into medical experiments during the Holocaust. Um, so I'm wondering how you balance, like, how you balance ideological, um, how do you balance ideological values and what you think or what we would want a high school student or a middle school student to actually understand and know.
I think that the having kids learn accurate historical information is fine. Making sure it's age appropriate is a balance. I think there are a lot of 8th grade social studies curricula is focused on the Holocaust. So
Mhm.
having assignments related to what happened during the Holocaust may make sense. I don't know if the graphic nature of that assignment makes sense for an 8th grader, but that also could just be a teacher not considering age appropriateness and really wanting kids to understand the horrors of the Holocaust. I mean, those experiments are some of the most grotesque things that a person ever did to another person.
Mhm.
I don't know that I would want an 8th grader necessarily being assigned with something like that, but I could see why it comes into that grade because Holocaust education, I believe, is for many states starts in 8th grade.
Mhm. So you brought up an important point about differentiating between ideology and um, age appropriate lessons. So David Albert asked a question. Our local school district just adopted the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action curriculum. BLM at school is overtly hostile to Jews, Jewish organizations like ADL in Israel. The school district did this just 2 weeks after using, now he uses this word, after USDE OCR, whatever that is, found
The
that
Office for Civil Rights.
okay, found that the school system had likely become a hostile environment for Jewish students. Can pressure be brought to bear on the recalcitrant K through 12 school boards and administrations over the adoption of a curriculum that are hostile to Jews?
Yes, and I mean, I argue that the BLM at schools curriculum is hostile to Black people. It's not a curriculum. The
Uh,
kids aren't learning anything in that except how to be activists, and I don't think we send our kids to school to learn how to be activists. Now, the argument that comes from people that oppose the BLM at schools curriculum has always been, oh, well, kids should learn about race and racism. The BLM at schools curriculum isn't talking about racism, whether in historical context or a current one. It's taking positions that have been anti-Black. They're anti-American, they're anti-Jewish. I think that if you have a district that has been found to be hostile to Jews, then the rot goes deeper than the adoption of one curriculum. And I would look again, who's on the school board? Is it an elected school board? If not, if the mayor appointed the school board, when's the next mayoral race? How do you rally people to put to support people that are going to be in positions to make these decisions, who have actually the interest of kids in mind and not their own personal agenda?
So a related question is from Daniel Barrick. He says, what can you say about the Rethinking Schools curricula of the Zinn-funded educational project? I canceled my subscription to Rethinking Schools because of what to me appears to be a one-sided perspective of Israel and Palestine. I familiar with that?
I am. Oh, yes, I'm familiar with both of them. They're terrible. I mean, the people that are running those organizations have an agenda. It's not an agenda to teach kids how to learn or how to become healthy members of society. Their agenda is strictly ideological, it's strictly political, and their political positions are ones that, to me, aren't conducive to a free liberal society, which is the one that we live in. Now, they're a well-oiled machine. Rethinking Schools and is in it. Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States is taught or recommended or suggested reading in countless classrooms across the country. Rethinking Schools puts out, again, open source material that hundreds of thousands of public school teachers access, download, and use in the classrooms. They should not be taught. They're not historically accurate. There's no scholarship to them. And I think that we can pick apart and really look and focus on the anti-Semitism that's in there, because it's pretty clear to see. It's pretty loud. But I think there's also other things that we need to pay attention to. As these programs have come into schools, increasingly come into schools, our kids' achievement has fallen off of a cliff. We can't function as a society if only 30% of kids are proficient in reading. We can't. There needs to be, and I'm not somebody who thinks there's only reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think that civics and social studies and history and art and music and physical education are all important parts of K-12 education. But regardless, whatever's being taught needs to be accurate. And Rethinking Schools and Zen aren't.
Um, so, Shulamit Finkelstein asks a question: what is the role of the school board and the parents, and what happens in the classroom?
Again, it depends on the district, but the school board is responsible for overall what's happening in the district. So the school board, you need to make sure that the teachers are have the tools necessary to be able to teach kids, to make sure that they're qualified. A lot of this seems to turn into like, oh, teachers are bad, administrators are bad. We need to all throw tomatoes at them. That's not the position that I take. We have a system that just isn't very well supported. I've seen some of the most dedicated, well-intentioned teachers bring in some of the most horrendous curricular materials simply because they don't have anywhere else to go or to look for. They're unaware of other sources to get information to bring into the classroom. So the school board should be supporting the function of the schools, making sure that, again, that kids have what they need to learn in a proper, appropriate learning environment, and that teachers have the tools to do their jobs. How much free time do teachers spend gathering resources and materials, creating lessons, and searching and searching for professional development? I think that the school board should be making sure that our educators, the people that spend most of the waking day with our kids 5 days out of the week, have the tools necessary to do their jobs.
Somebody asked a question about teachers' unions. Is there any connection between teachers' unions and curriculum development and what's happening in the K through 12 space?
Unfortunately, yes, there is a lot, and it's not right now. It's not good. Um, an example I can give, a recent example. I don't know if this event occurred yet or if it's coming up, but the UTLA, the United Teachers of Los Angeles Union, is bringing in a group of anti-Semites to do anti-Semitism training. It's endorsed by the teachers union. So teachers in the second largest school district in the country, LA USD is second to New York, in size. They will be trained by anti-Semites in anti-Semitism. It's like bringing in the KKK to give training on civil rights.
Um, An attendee asked, do you think parts of the 1619 project should be brought forward in schools or should it be eliminated wholesale? And what about the 1776 project? Are you familiar with those?
I am. I'm not a fan of the 1619 project, again, for the reasons I've stated before. It's very low on scholarship. It's historically inaccurate. I think that the presentation of the material is coming with an agenda that really doesn't have anything to do with learning, but has more to do with convincing people to look at the founding of the United States from one particular lens. Um, 1776, the curriculum, what I know about it, is slightly better. It's better, at least as far as historical accuracy. I'm sure there's still a bias there in how to present the founding of the United States from a particular lens. I'm a fan of truth and honesty in education, and being presented to kids in an age appropriate way. We wouldn't have a science teacher, teaching fourth graders geography and teaching them that the earth is flat. We're allowing that type of historical inaccuracy to be taught in other disciplines. We're allowing it to be taught in history and social studies, and sometimes in English and language arts. And those disciplines are no less academic disciplines than geography is.
Um, there's so many questions, so many questions. Uh, yeah, people are wondering, what's the role of the principal in a school curriculum? How do principals, how much do they have a handle on what's actually being taught in the classroom?
So it's principal's responsibility to know what's happening in the classrooms. And again, it's a tough job. It's hard. How are you going to juggle? You have a dozen teachers, you have 20 teachers, knowing every little thing a teacher says in the classroom and whether it's spot on or not. But the role is to be aware of the learning environment of the school, and also to be aware that it's okay for a school, for a teacher to try something that doesn't work. You may not know that something's not going to work until you try it. I think it's important for somebody in a leadership position to have the wherewithal to see that this is not really achieving the goal that we set out to achieve. So we're going to pivot and do something different. That's not what we see enough of, I think, in K through 12 education. We see doubling down. We see an inability to either admit or recognize a mistake and pivot towards something different and better. And I think that anyone in a leadership position, from a principal to superintendent to the members of the school board, have the responsibility to do that.
I'm wondering if we could take a little bit of a turn. I think our listeners would be very interested in the work that the community engagement with the North American Values Institute, what the American Values Institute is, and the work that you do, and the work that they do, and where people can go if they have a question about a curriculum or they have concerns. Are there places that people can go to have conversations to get some chizuk, some strength to deal with this? So tell us a little bit about the North American Values Institute, where you work.
Sure. So you can find us at navivalues.org. We are formally the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values. The work that we do now is focused on K through 12 education. We're focused on making sure that kids have healthy learning environments, access to accurate information, and the tools necessary to succeed. A lot of that work means that we're countering a lot of what I covered just in the slides. So the imposition of ideology that's replacing scholarship and education. I'm sure everyone is pretty aware that the first big thing and indicator of that has been the just insane amount of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish bigotry that we're seeing in schools. And many more people became aware of that post October 7th. We've been working on this since before October 7th because we saw this shift where kids were being taught things like settler colonialism. Kids were being taught things like there's a group of folks that are oppressors, there's a group of folks that are the oppressed. You have to be one or the other. Anything that's done to the oppressor in the name of liberation is justified, and anything done by the oppressed is okay and acceptable and in fact honorable. And so we've been working to raise awareness to what we've seen happen in K through 12 education, to counter it in ways that we can, to help foster community engagement in our schools, even if you don't have a kid in school. If your kids are graduated, if you don't have children, we all pay taxes to our public school system. Our public schools are the place where our civic societies are built or torn down. And it really is our choice in making that. So we're working directly with parents to help them get engaged, to help them combat any of the, anti-Jewish bigotry or illiberalism or targeting or retaliation they face. We've connected folks with, if they need legal supports, if they need help speaking and connecting with their elected officials, we help them with that. We work directly with elected officials to work on things that we've seen because we have a fantastic team of researchers, writers, speakers who really are tackling this very, very big issue across the country.
Can you talk more about the relationship between academia, between what happens in the college, and how that filters into the K through 12 curriculum and teacher training and the connection there?
I'm happy to. I did not include this, and I was debating whether to include it actually in my slides, but there's a pretty great example that shows a little bit of what's happening, and it's from the University of California, Santa Cruz's Critical Race and Ethnic Studies Department. Now, this department, again, they're not shy about their anti-Jewish bigotry and their demonization and hatred of Israel. They put on teacher training, teacher professional development for local teachers. They partnered with other organizations, including the Institute for the Critical Study of Zionism, which seeks to decouple Jews from Zionism. That believes that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, that believes that Jews should live forever in the diaspora and not have a homeland. They couple with them and put on institutes that K through 12 teachers attend. They put out materials, lessons that K through 12 teachers access. Another example comes from universities like Brown or Stanford or Penn, who they partner with their local school districts and they provide like free curricula for these districts. So I live right outside of Philadelphia. Philadelphia, which I've worked in the schools there before as a social worker, is one of the poorest school districts in the country. So they welcome having an Ivy League university provide them teacher training, lessons, tools, and supports. But if that school of education is ideologically captured or has an ideological agenda, well, that's a direct feeder into some of the most under-resourced school districts in the country. Brown University has similar program that does similar things with surrounding school districts, as does Stanford.
Mhm. Michael Grockman asked, can you give an example about the 1619 use of inaccurate statements? Can you give some specific examples?
So they actually changed a few of their statements in the book that got challenged, but didn't change it in the curriculum that's used in schools. But one of the most blatant ones that I take issue with is that the founding of the United States was not in 1619, and the argument that the author that Jones makes for that is faulty and it's misguided. What it does is it lets off the European powers that were trafficking Black Africans into slavery, and instead places that blame on a country that wasn't in existence yet. I think that that's a wrong take. I think that it's been proven to be historically inaccurate and actually just really has no foundation in reality. So, in order to blame the United States for all the ills of slavery, we don't need to pretend that the United States existed in 1619. Chattel slavery was a horrific evil that happened and occurred under the United States, and from 1776 through the Civil War through 1865, a little bit later in Texas. I think that we can there's enough blame there. There's no reason to extend it by a century plus some decades. It makes no sense. One, it lets off the European powers that were doing that, and they should not be left off the hook. It was a horrible evil. And it places blame where it doesn't lie, and for a specific time period that it doesn't lie in.
Somebody asked about the current administration. So have you seen any changes? Is there, do you feel that there's going to be, it says, does the current administration have any legal power over the state government to address this?
I'm one of my disclaimer, I'm a social worker, not an attorney. So I will give you my opinion that is definitely not a legal opinion. It is just my opinion as Brandy. There's a certain level of power and leverage that the federal government has because the U.S. Department of Education does provide some funding to the states. However, most K through 12 education funding comes either from the state or at the local level. And so folks really need to, if they're concerned, really need to get involved with local or state level politics to have a voice. There are certain things that can be guidance from the US Department of Education. And some of that leverage actually comes kind of in a backwards way. One example is I showed the example of woke kindergarten. Now they received the $250,000 that they received for the contract with Hayward Unified School District was federal funds. It was actually COVID funds that was sent to the school district to do something to improve literacy and numeracy. Surprise, surprise, after the program, both literacy and numeracy actually went down instead of improving. But that was federal funds. So there are some levers there to kind of push on, but that it's not going, I don't think that that's the easy button to push, except where it relates to how the federal government, the federal Department of Education, funds universities. The federal government funds the universities who have these schools of education and critical race and ethnic studies departments, and maybe that's a pressure point that can be pushed.
Mhm. Somebody asked a question. It's a loaded question. Why do you think this isn't getting more coverage in mainstream media? What about mainstream media?
I mean, I think there's a whole host of issues, but I mean, in all honesty, really, and uh, this isn't a denigration of mainstream media. There's other complaints I can make about them, but nobody pays attention to K through 12 education. I mean, most grown-ups, you graduate high school and you don't go back. You go back maybe for a parent-teacher conference. Most adults in America, we don't really know what's happening. One of the silver linings of Zoom schools during COVID was people became more aware of, oh, wait, what in the world is my kid learning? But without that, I think we would still be um, overall like ignorant to what's happening in K through 12 education, because who goes back into a high school after you graduate?
Hmm. There's a question about the California Teachers Union, which is particularly participant says particularly anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist in its ideology. And so what can you do, or what is being done about the California Teachers Union?
They
Is
are not the only one. There are multiple teachers unions that are pushing a lot of anti-Zionist Jew hatred. The things that are being done to combat that, there are teachers that are leaving the union, refusing to pay their union dues because they're either Jewish and Zionist or not Jewish and Zionist, and they don't want to be part of a union that is so bigoted. Um, there, there, there are ways to address union power and how much a union can impact or influence local education policies and maybe how much they shouldn't. And so there are things that are being done to address the power they have to impact what's actually happening in K through 12 education. It is a heavy lift. The teachers unions are super powerful. Most people before this insane amount of anti-Semitism would have been for teachers unions because most people appreciate the work teachers do. Um, and I want to say again that this isn't a demonization. It shouldn't be of teachers. There's a number of very loud and possibly powerful bad actors. It's not every teacher. It's not every union member. A lot of the teachers unions are also losing membership because they're not representing teachers. You'll have a Jewish teacher who's getting retaliated against by her school district. And instead of representing her, the union isn't helping her, even though she's a union dues member. I mean, that's happening across the country.
Is there anything that the federal government and the courts can do to remedy this, what's happening in the courts?
So school districts have gotten sued. Some of them successfully. There are Office of Civil Rights complaints. Unfortunately, what happened, and I don't want to go into like get too partisan or political with this, but what was happening in the previous administration is, I mean, there were hundreds of civil rights complaints and they were just sitting there and nothing was being done with them. So the hope is that something will be done with them. People will take seriously the violation of the civil rights of American Jews and hold those accountable who deserve to be held accountable. And that can happen through the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. That can happen through the court system. There's a handful of very hardworking, I don't know when they sleep, proud Jewish attorneys that are doing a lot of work for either no pay or definitely underpaid. And so one of the things that we can do is help them and support them. And again, the hope is that a lot of these complaints will actually get their day in court.
So in the time we have remaining, just a few minutes, is there anything that you haven't been able to explain to us or say? And what message would you like to leave us with?
There's a ton that I didn't say. I actually made my presentation short because I was figuring there might be a ton of questions and I wanted to get to as many as possible. But the overall message is you have to get involved, especially at the local level. You have to. You have to run for school board. You have to identify folks to rally behind and support who can run for school board. You have to figure out who is your district bringing in to provide teacher training. What curricula are they using? What books are they recommending kids read? What material are they presenting to kids? And who's responsible for making sure that all of those things don't violate civil rights? Discrimination is illegal against everybody. Civil rights apply to every American. So this isn't civil rights aren't only for Black folks. Civil rights aren't only for poor folks. Like they're for everybody. And we need to be aware. We need to be involved. And if anyone has any questions or needs any help, then you can reach out to us.
So again, the organization is called the North American Values Institute. And it's a young but very powerful and very effective organization. And thank you so much for such a robust conversation. There were so many questions. And I think we got to most of them, but I'm sure people can reach out to you. And if they have more questions to ask you. So thank you so much for your presentation. Our next Scholar Circle features Dr. Eli Aziz Saltzman, and the topic will be From Washington to Jerusalem, the Dynamics of U.S.-Israel Relations. Please join us on Monday, March 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So thank you all for attending, and thank you for your questions, and thank you so much for such a robust and insightful and very scary conversation about what's happening in our school system. But I think you motivated all of us to become much more engaged, and so thank you for that presentation and for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone, and we'll see you on March the 10th at 7 p.m. for From Washington to Jerusalem, the Dynamics of U.S.-Israel Relations. Good night, all.
Thank you.